There was once a plan to change Paris forever. Large parts of the historic center destroyed, and in its place, buildings that touched the sky and served as the headquarters for the French elite. It was the master plan of one of the most influential architects of the 20th century, Le Corbusier, as much a man who wanted to design buildings as one who wanted absolute power, and to see his vision for a centrally controlled, hierarchical society come to life. From the 1920s to the 1930s, Paris's population grew from 4 to 5 million. It was the highest density European city, outdoing London and Berlin. Life was dirty, diseased, and overcrowded. So in 1922, Le Corbusier came up with a supposed solution. He had designed a new city built for a modern man, and he took the ideals of that city and imagined a new Paris. His first city attempted to solve 4 problems: congestion in the center, inefficient density, inadequate transportation, and a lack of green open space. It divides into 9 zones: a main city with an intersection of 24 60-story cruciform towers, a middle section dedicated to residential space split between luxury and working-class homes, and of course, a green belt separating industrial as well as garden cities. But it's important that we look closer, because it's a city designed with an iron fist. The city is made out of only 3 buildings: the cruciform skyscraper, the redent, and the closed compound, each made to guarantee equal access to views and sunlight from whichever position. For the cruciform skyscraper, the serrated shape created traps for light, and the elites who worked there would receive a better oversight over the masses that they were privileged enough to guide. And the other 2 buildings were residential, built with modular apartments ready for mass production. All 3 meticulously designed and controlled by a single person. But he went further. Some of his buildings were designed with concrete piles, creating a city on stilts. Not only did this give access to light on the ground floors, but it also created his new transportation network. He separated traffic into heavy, normal, and fast. Heavy traffic went underground. With a city raised on concrete piles, the underside of buildings could be used directly as areas for offloading and onloading. Since the ground floor was raised, that's where you'd find normal goods traffic, including pedestrian walkways. And the last network, concerning fast traffic, would be on raised highways running on a north-south, east and west axis. And all of these roads met at the center at a multi-storied transportation hub, which included an aerodrome for air traffic for the planes that landed between the skyscrapers. And it's this city that was the model for a new Paris. From the sky, we can just begin to understand the sheer scale of Corbusier's plans. Paris has always had a dense network of roads and inner courtyards, and he purposely selected the most infectious neighborhoods, the narrowest of streets, to pave over, impacting around 7 arrondissements in total. By projecting the skyscraper onto the same scale section of Paris, we can get an idea of how many buildings the plan would raise. Like Corbusier's first city, Paris would be divided into zones. Sector A, the business center, containing 18 cruciform skyscrapers, with redents for additional residential space. Sector B, containing 2 cruciform skyscrapers, as well as a central station that was located underground. Sector C, the residential and administrative area, which is almost entirely occupied by the snaking redents of the first city. And then there is Sector D, containing 8 cruciform skyscrapers. Corbusier believed that the introduction of tall buildings would increase the density of Paris from around 300 to 1,400 inhabitants per acre, while increasing total area green space. Placed between the skyscrapers would be triple-floored malls and subways, which would connect all the skyscrapers with each other. His goal was to make Paris the world's city of administration. If it wasn't already clear to you, it's probably worth knowing that Corbusier was kind of a weird man. He created his own entirely new measurement system based on human length and the golden ratio. He was obsessed with reinforced concrete and the desire to put human beings in uniform, standardized cells. And unsurprisingly, he had a weird relationship with his mom, and also fascists, which often goes hand in hand. See, like the cities he designed, Corbusier believed in a strict, hierarchical, and centrally controlled society. His city was at its core, figuratively and literally, one of elite administration. The skyscrapers were to be the headquarters for the captains of business, of industry, of finance, of politics, masters of science, of pedagogy, of thought, the spokesman of the heart, the artists, poets, musicians. He drew up his own pyramid of natural hierarchies, arranging society with a technocratic elite at the top to an increasing bottom of the lesser skilled. And the top of that pyramid would use the skyscrapers, being able to clearly examine the world that they commanded. And at the end of the day, these elites would return to their luxury housing system in Sector C by using, of course, a massive, elevated highway running on a north-south, east-west axis. To make his plans more stomachable, in Sector A he'd maintain around 14 historical buildings. In Sector B, around 5. And in Sector C, around 7. If it came true today, you'd find a cathedral next to a gigantic skyscraper. He also tried to dive into finances. According to Corbusier, if land values equaled A, and the previous rebuilding of Paris resulted in an increase of 5 times the land value without an increase in density, then surely his plan for building at a higher density would result in an increase of 4 times that land value. The logic, irrefutable. He approached the chief executives of major automobile companies, who he thought would support the massive new streets he had planned, and although he got some to agree with him, he didn't get enough. His plans were considered too radical, and they'd be rejected. But that wouldn't stop him. Until he died, Corbusier promoted his vision and worldview to other cities. And sometimes he did get his way, including with Brasilia, designed by a student of his, or Chandigarh in India, designed almost exclusively by Corbusier. And then there's also the Bijlmer in the Netherlands. Although it's not designed by Corbusier, it's probably the best example of the planning he had inspired. And he drew up plans for a lot of other major cities, not just Paris. He had plans for Geneva, Berlin, and Bogota. But likely the most insane plan he proposed was the plan he had for Algiers, the Plan Obus. It would lead to the construction of a superhighway skyscraper running over a historical city, with business skyscrapers overshadowing and hiding the views of the indigenous. It was the line before it wasn't ever cool. Corbusier's goal was to make Algiers the head of the African continent, and by extension, France. The story is fascinating, which is why I've made an entirely different video on it, which is exclusively on Nebula, that you can watch right now. And once you're there, you can then binge watch some fantastic videos that are also exclusively on Nebula, like Neo's, Mustard's, City Beautiful, and countless others. I love Nebula because it allows me to be more pretentious than I would be on YouTube, without having to perform algorithm-friendly acts like featuring human faces or caring about what other people think. Nebula also gives you access to classes where you can watch that dude who makes Wendover Productions lecture you about Greek philosophy. There are also some courses on there that I honestly wish I had seen before I started producing videos. If you sign up for Nebula using the link below, you can get Nebula for as little as a bit over $2.50 a month. You'll support me and a lot of others in being able to buy food, which is really nice, but you'll also get a bunch of other exclusive stuff for doing that. Check out go.nebulatv/hoch and get 40% off of an annual subscription.
The Ouroboros is an ancient symbol of a snake eating its own tail. There are many interpretations of it. One is the endless cycle of nature and time. Another is renewal. As the snake eats more of its back, the fresh front will replace it. But the most literal is destruction. The snake will eventually eat itself to death. This is the worst era in film history. I don't mean financially. I haven't run the numbers. I don't know if there are more flops than usual. I don't mean critically. I don't know if movies are getting more bad reviews than in prior eras. I mean artistically. Artistically, we are in the worst era in film history. My reasoning for this claim is simple. For the past 10 years, mainstream culture has been inundated with terrible movies, lacking in vision, mired with problem after problem, shackled to nostalgia without substance or care for what made those original nostalgic movies good in the first place. And they are now trying to deny the sacredness of death. Yes, you heard me right. Deny the sacredness of death. You've heard the opinion, there's too many remakes and sequels these days, so much that it's become cliche. The more accurate problem is that there's too many bad remakes and sequels these days. I doubt many people would be complaining if all these franchise additions were good. However, I also don't think a landscape filled with remakes and sequels and little else is likely to be good. You may say, well, hang on, that's just the super mainstream. What about all these original indie and low-budget films coming out? And I will retort, those are good to have, but mainstream culture is important. It's where the most money is. It's what gets the most eyeballs. I think it says something about us, and it says something about the creative limitations of some of our most paid artists, that mainstream culture is so derivative right now. We are in an age of not just copies, but bad copies, and I intend to watch it all burn to the ground. Psst, there's something I want to tell you about. My heritage. Last time I told you that our family has a picture on our kitchen island with several ancestors in it, and they all look pretty radical. Problem is, we don't have any idea who most of them are. That's why My Heritage is an illuminating website. It can search through 20 billion historical records, and all you need are a few names and dates, and it will start to fill in your family tree with better and even new information. Instant Discoveries is a way for new people to be added to your tree automatically. I can add people I know are in my past, which can connect me with more potential ancestors. Hey Mom, I'm on the My Heritage website again.
I loved how you found that other photo of my grandmother when she was probably 3 years old. I don't know, man, it really activates that section of my brain that's dedicated to my grandmother. Mm-hmm. It's like, even at the age of 3, I'm looking at her in that touched up photo.
Yes.
I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like I see her.
Can you tell me who this person is?
I have no idea. Was there a clue on My Heritage?
I found an alternative photo, and I'm pretty certain that's probably the same person. This is Nancy James.
Nancy James.
Born in 1855. She was born in Tennessee, grandmother of your grandmother. If this kind of family sleuthing interests you, sign up for a 14-day free trial with the link below and enjoy all My Heritage has to offer. Thanks to My Heritage for sponsoring this video. The Star Wars franchise has got to be the most analyzed franchise in the 21st century. The Star Wars sequel trilogy has been critiqued possibly more than any other franchise edition in history, even more than the infamous prequel trilogy that came before it. But why is that? I won't belabor this point, because you've heard it a lot. The sequel trilogy, and a vast majority of Star Wars media under Disney, is heavily flawed. And this is not something that is simply my personal opinion. Watch the entirety of the original 3 Star Wars movies and count things that are mistakes. Objective mistakes. A stormtrooper in the background hitting his head on a door, or Luke kicking too far from an actor to look like it connected. But what about coincidences or contrivances in the plot? Take the sequence where Luke gets more and more of his friends captured in Jabba's palace in an attempt to rescue Han Solo. If you really analyze this plan, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And if you tallied up these problems across the entire original trilogy, at the upper end, you'd probably have 100 problems. Some big, some small. Which by no means is unusual when creating a large and complicated fictional story and world. When you get to the prequel trilogy, these problems become more numerous and more severe. Why do the Jedi use Force Run once and never again? Why does Obi-Wan smash through a window to latch onto this drone when he could easily plummet to his death? Why isn't this assassination drone built to self-destruct so no one can track it back? I know Obi-Wan is a Jedi, but this is downright suicidal. How is an electrified spear thrown very hard capable of shattering Star Cruiser windows? But I think the worst of the prequel's flaws have to do with the characters. Like how Anakin Skywalker goes from being tempted to the dark side and maiming someone to defend another, to slaughtering innocent children in mere minutes. Or how Obi-Wan leaves Anakin to brutally die. What compounds problems like these is that the prequels affect the continuity of the original trilogy. Across all the prequels, I would estimate there may be 1,000 problems. Some big, some small. Which is a lot. Again, these are estimates. The exact number doesn't matter too much. The point is that from trilogy to trilogy, these problems increase in quantity dramatically. And when I talk about problems, I'm not talking about stilted acting or whether I have an emotional connection to the films. I'm talking about things that don't logically follow. Errors that may not be noticed by the audience at first, but are nonetheless still there and tend to damage the work upon further contemplation. And if fixed, would make that piece of media better. When you get to the sequel trilogy, across all 3 films, I estimate there are thousands of problems. A knife is painted out of the background to keep Rey from dying during a fight scene. The half-sunken wreckage of the Death Star is used as a marker for a knife map that can only work while standing at a specific point on the landscape while pointed at a specific part of the wreckage. All of this while ignoring the fact this wreckage should not exist in huge pieces like this anyway. Kylo Ren's TIE fighter gets damaged, rolls across the desert at 200 miles per hour, and explodes. He walks out of it perfectly fine moments later. Even if you like these films, you have to admit these moments do not work. They cannot function in a coherent story. You have to admit these films would be better without these problems. Yet these films are riddled with them. It is rare for any given scene to not have a problem within it. And what compounds problems like these are how they affect the original and prequel trilogies. The Force Awakens was hugely influential on the film industry in ways we have only recently begun to comprehend. Much of the teasing in the movie and trailer is echoed in sequels of similar franchise giants. The Force Awakens rehashes the general plot structure, themes, and iconography of A New Hope, which satisfied most people at the time, but in hindsight, the film had very little substance in itself. Beyond a few concepts of concepts, it had no merits that stood on their own. The Last Jedi also borrows iconography and themes of The Empire Strikes Back, such as the rebels being scattered and hunted throughout the film, but you're left wondering why the Resistance, which should be in power, is being chased and outgunned by those who shouldn't have an overwhelming force? Sure, there are plenty of original ideas in the film too, but they only seek to cut short plot lines that had been established in The Force Awakens. And finally, you have The Rise of Skywalker, which is so blatant in its borrowing that it resurrects a villain from the original trilogy who exploded twice. Throughout the whole sequel trilogy, even things like spaceships are simply original trilogy ships but painted black, or soft reboots of original trilogy ships. There is no natural evolution in technology. There is no changing of the power dynamics in the galaxy. There is no change in the strategies or behaviors of the warring factions from the decades before. And even though they tease us with potential ideas, there is no change in how we understand the villains or the heroes. After the conclusion of this trilogy, it became blatantly obvious that they had no overarching plan. You don't end up with this many problems within a trilogy because of a few slip-ups. Your priorities have to be seriously out of whack from the very beginning. There was clearly a lack of communication between teams, a lack of time, a lack of care. From the very beginning, Disney wanted to recapture the magic, feel, and success of the original trilogy, but did not have the planning, skills, vision, or originality to do that. If they did just rehash the original trilogy, it might have done okay. The problem is the sequel trilogy isn't just a copy of the original trilogy, it's a bad copy. All they could do was chew up what they had before and spit it back out. In the Ahsoka TV series, based off of a character in the animated Star Wars The Clone Wars series, they have to bring back Hayden Christensen's Anakin Skywalker. They have to tease us with Darth Vader. In the Book of Boba Fett, they have to bring back Cad Bane, one of the coolest characters in the animated Clone Wars, just to kill him off after a couple of scenes. Truly baffling, they put in the effort to bring in this character in live action just to unceremoniously end his story forever. At the end of the Han Solo film, they have to tease us with Darth Maul of all people. I just remembered this, at the end of Obi-Wan, they tease us with Force Ghost Qui-Gon Jinn. Even in The Acolyte, despite how terrible it is a show with 90% brand new, never before seen or referenced characters. But still, it has to have a Sith with a black spooky mask and unconventional red lightsaber, and has to tease us at the very end with Darth Plagueis and Yoda. They cannot help themselves. Could Star Wars TV shows utilize these existing characters to enhance their stories? Yes. Will they ever use them as anything else than as a crutch to prop up their own terrible scripts with memories of better things? No. That's all they've done. That's all they'll ever do. Andor is their one good show, which makes it miles ahead of these other shows, and it doesn't have any of these silly character teases. The only thing against it is that it's slower. The original Star Wars was a product of multiple influences reforged into one work from a genuine artist during a time where innovation was necessary. I don't think Disney in its current form is capable of replicating that right now. The Star Wars brand now has significantly more movies and shows that are bad and forgettable than it does movies and shows which are good and special. Disney has diluted the brand and its identity. In the trailer for The Skeleton Crew, we see alien environments that don't feel alien. There are aliens walking alien pets, aliens going to school, taking tests, and wearing backpacks. Aliens walking down concrete roads and sidewalks that go to homes with pitched roofs. This isn't a Star Wars neighborhood. This is a Disney Channel original movie suburb with a coat of paint. It speaks to such a lack of imagination. As long as artists are making things that are only references to their own brand, that are only inspired by this incest of ideation, I don't think we're going to get good movies, let alone worthy sequels. When you look at the recent Marvel movies and TV shows, they are also riddled with problems just like this. In Endgame, they spend a good chunk of the movie simply revisiting Marvel's greatest hits in the form of time travel. Spider-Man No Way Home is a better movie than you'd expect, but it does rub me the wrong way how they have to bring back Sam Raimi's villains and previous iterations of Spider-Man in this convoluted way. At least the film has the balls to rehandle characters in previous films that were not well received. But I fear Hollywood learned the wrong lessons from the success of this movie. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was the last Marvel project I ever saw in theaters, and it was so bad it gave me a headache by the time it was over. Besides constantly not making sense, and fundamentally not understanding what infinity actually means, they, for some reason, bring in recognizable characters such as Professor X, played by the Patrick Stewart, Mr. Fantastic, played by John Krasinski, Captain Carter, Captain Marvel, and Black Bolt, just to 5 minutes later kill them all violently, in the dumbest ways possible, because Wanda wants to be with her imaginary kids. It's baffling. When you look at the Rings of Power series, it's also riddled with problems and callbacks. When you look at Deadpool and the Wolverine, it's riddled with problems and callbacks. Alien Romulus is riddled with problems and callbacks.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Get away from her. You bitch.
Oh god, I haven't even mentioned all the Jurassic World films, all the new Terminator sequels, Wonder Woman 1984, Matrix Resurrections, yet another old Indiana Jones. Ever since 2015, there's not just been a bunch of sequels released every year, but there has been at least one infamous sequel released every single year. The year before that, Dumb and Dumber 2 was released, which I saw, but I don't think anyone remembers. All I can recall is how gross and old Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels looked. What actually happened in that movie? Wait, the United States Department of Justice charged that money used to produce the film was stolen from a Malaysian government investment fund. Huh, learn something new every day. If you look at the announcements for Disney movies, it is bleak. At D23, 4 out of the 17 films are not sequels or remakes, and only 3 are seemingly original. If you look further into the future, it does not get much better. People would probably not be worried about the state of entertainment if most of these sequels were stellar, but there are signs most of these are going to be awful. The Snow White remake is ludicrously expensive, has been hit with controversy after controversy, and a 1-year delay. The Toy Story franchise concluded well with the third one and has no idea where to go. The Lion King remake prequel does not have the writing or nostalgia of the original Lion King to use as a crutch. Nearly every Marvel project since Endgame has been a disaster. Incredibles 2 did not live up to the original, and frankly, I don't think Disney has the teeth to ever make a good Incredibles film. Is it possible these projects could turn out well? Yes. Is it likely? No. A landscape of purely derivative art is not healthy for creative minds.
I used to think there were no bad ideas, only bad executions. Now, I'm not so sure about this.
The existence of a live-action Harold and the Purple Crayon movie is hilarious on the face of it. An animated film adapting Harold would have plenty of potential, but a live-action film seems, maybe I'm being dramatic here, kind of impossible to be good. The appeal of the children's book is that it's a story about someone creating their own world through drawing. Everything he does in the book is two-dimensional and simplified. There's a visual joke where Harold shakes his crayon and unintentionally creates wavy water that he falls into. And they animate this. In fact, they fully animate the first 5 minutes of the film, just to pivot to the real world. Why? If you have to have live action, why not do it Roger Rabbit style and have 2D animation interact with the real world? Making this cute toddler into a grown man and then putting him into the boring, already made real world that spawns glossy, hyper-realistic objects out of his drawings instead of taking the obvious path and creating an animated 2D film is just a bad idea. While we're on children's books, The Giving Tree feature-length movie would be a bad idea. And I know damn well a producer has looked at the Giving Tree sales numbers and thought about it. The book is so concise in its message and purposefully leaves out a lot of information to convey its message that there is very little you can add to it without actively undermining it. A typical Hollywood screenwriter would probably expand on the boy's life or give the tree more to do in the story, and God forbid, we'd have a bunch of scenes like this. Come boy, come, swing from my branches and play in my shade.
Whoa! Did that tree just talk? That's a talking tree! I must be going crazy!
Is it possible for a Giving Tree movie to be made that's good? Yes, but it would have to be very creative in its storytelling. So unusual and new in a way I can't even fathom, and I think that's very unlikely to happen. Furthermore, is it possible for a Giving Tree movie to be made that's even better than the book? I say that's damn near impossible without just making your own original story. This is what makes the Joker movie kind of an oddity. The Joker is a decent movie about mental illness and living in a culture lacking in empathy that is only tenuously connected to the DC universe. It's a Trojan horse movie, sneaking in an original story into something masquerading as a DC supervillain film. After Joker's success, I was kind of expecting more original stories with big franchise paint on them, but I can't recall any more examples like this. The Lego Movie is a film that you would not expect to be good, but surprisingly is. I owe most of its success to two things: prioritizing creating an enjoyable story before trying to sell its product, and treating the property with sincerity. The film really ties everything together by connecting it to the real world at the end, yes, but only as a way to emphasize what the purpose of a buildable toy like Lego is at its core. The Super Mario Bros. Movie is possibly the most generic and safe kids movie I have ever seen. I'm not talking about the original, which is the opposite of that. If you saw the trailer, yeah, that's the movie. There is not a single thing in this film that will surprise you. However, it's not bad. It's nice. It's fine. This film was very well received, and I believe that's because the story was not insulting and the movie treats the Mushroom Kingdom with awe and sincerity. A lesser film might be irritatingly sarcastic and mock the whole idea of platforming and power-ups. But because this film is faithful and interprets these video game ideas sincerely, people are more charitable to the film than it probably deserves. Judging by the trailer, the Minecraft movie is going to be profoundly mediocre. I can just feel it, dripping with insincerity. Oh, the main character you play as in the game is named Steve. How stupid is that? I'm gonna roll my eyes.
This guy is such a tool bag.
Look at the animals and how derpy they look. Wow, the world is made of blocks. Isn't that weird? Isn't that just heckin' crazy?
What the hell?
You don't have to place things right on the crafting table to craft. Who cares? I hope this trailer is just really misleading, because it depresses me that no matter what happens, it's still going to make $1 billion. Right in the middle of editing this, the trailer for the Electric State movie, based off of Simon Stålenhag's graphic novel, was released. And I am actually kind of shocked at how generic it looks. This trailer is pure slop. More AAA list actors we know are not going to play actual characters. Looks like we're getting another Gus Fring. How do you take such atmospheric artwork and turn it into this?
Who throws a fridge? Son of a...
Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. I have never seen anyone turn something so silent and somber into pure, loud Marvel action crap. Oh my god, talk about not understanding what you're adapting. The key to making a work based on an existing non-film property is sincerity. Treating the thing you're adapting seriously and understanding it on its own merits. And if you understand it on its own merits, you'll understand that the typical fictional character enters the real world or vice versa plot, and treating a property like any other property isn't going to cut it for most things. You're going to have to be unconventional. You're going to have to work by and understand the rules of that cultural artifact, or else you're just taking something in our culture and reheating it for the masses. Most Disney live-action remakes are financially successful. You should find this to be an immensely sobering fact. The Lion King remake is bad. I knew it was going to be bad from the first trailer. The Aladdin remake is bad. I knew it was going to be bad when I first saw Will Smith's blue mug. Guess what? The Lilo and Stitch movie is going to be bad. The Hercules remake is going to be bad. The Moana remake is going to be bad. Not a single one of them has been worthwhile. So why does anyone expect the next one to be good? I attribute the success of these films solely to the fact it's a recognizable property done up in a new coat of paint. Something you've seen before, but with added spectacle. I can moan and groan about Hollywood's lack of originality and artistic drive, but people, regular, common people, continue to pay for these movies. We're paying for our culture to be cannibalized. What the general public needs to realize is these remakes aren't just copies, they're bad copies. Just look at YMS's video on the Lion King remake to see that this remake is demonstrably worse than the beloved classic it's trying to imitate in seemingly every way, from the animation to the music to the voice acting to the story itself. I expected the Aladdin 2019 remake to be just below average. I was genuinely surprised to discover it is a film worse than its original in every conceivable way. The film is gray, ugly, and bloated beyond belief. You feel that extra 30 minutes. There were about 2 tiny additions I liked. a bunch of things that made no difference, and a whole lot of things that made the story actively worse. To name just two, the added songs sung by Jasmine are completely forgettable, and the second one literally pauses the universe of the movie in the middle of a scene to be sung. It's the most jarring thing I've ever seen in a musical. Abu touches treasure in the Cave of Wonders, the cave where you're explicitly not supposed to touch any treasure, not the gem that comes later that causes the cave to collapse, literally before that. And it doesn't cave in or spew lava. Aladdin walks on all these coins getting to the lamp. He's touching treasure. They didn't have to put these coins here. Guess which version didn't put treasure on major walkways? If you think this is it, no, there's so much more. The mistakes in this film compound on themselves so much, I need half the video to explain them. Disney could have had Will Smith play a fresh interpretation of the genie, which he does sparingly, but for the most part, they had no confidence in themselves, so I'm sure they spent $1 million and thousands of VFX dungeon hours just to make Will Smith blue, and make him repeat all of Robin Williams' lines, but with less personality. I'll give it to them. They tried their damn best to make the Friend Like Me sequence have the same energy in live action. I mean, their sequence uses so much CGI, it's basically animated too. And still, it pales in comparison to the 2D original, because animation is practically real goddamn magic compared to the constraints of live action. It's so dumb. It's so dumb.
Evening. Guards are behind me.
Nearly everything they add is terrible, and everything they rehash is rehashed in a worse way. The Beauty and the Beast remake is much more bearable, but again, bloated. Adds very little I like, puts in a bunch of things that make no difference, and a whole lot of things that make it worse. Gaston doesn't throw eggs in this version, so how good could it possibly be? It's genuinely admirable how much they try to make these animated characters work in realistic CGI, but they just can't. The Little Mermaid is better than Aladdin, but still so boring and bloated. It adds two tiny things I like, puts in things that make no difference, and adds a whole lot of things that make it worse. Notice the pattern here? They add 3 new songs, 2 of which are not just forgettable, but legitimately some of the worst I've ever heard. The one sung by Prince Eric really helps you appreciate musical choreography, because for most of the song, he just drones on while walking down a dirt path. Melissa McCarthy. Alright, even good portrayal of Ursula. Nice job. They seem to try less with the design and animation of the sea creatures, especially during the Under the Sea sequence, which has not a single animal playing a nautical themed instrument. I find it comforting that this film was a financial disappointment for Disney.
No, don't put that sand dollar in your pocket, sir. Not in your pocket. You'll get mixed in with the others and become just a regular sand dollar. Which it is.
Besides parts of Aladdin, which is amazingly bad in the second half, all these remakes left my mind almost as soon as they entered. Their greatest sin is that they're boring. Artistically, there is nothing to be gained from these, because these aren't just copies, they're bad copies.
Wait a second, Solar Sands. There are good copies out there too. Come on, get out of here. Hey guys, Solar Sands remake Kino Corner here. I know it's easy to say that all remakes are bad. Hollywood is running out of ideas. They can't stop running out of ideas. But you know what? This might be controversial for me to say, but not all remakes are bad. In fact, some of them are great. Would you guess that classic movies like The Maltese Falcon, His Girl Friday, Ben-Hur, The Magnificent Seven, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Fly, The Thing, and Sorcerer are all remakes? Heck, even the most badass movie of all time, Michael Mann's Heat, is a remake. I mean, it's a remake of a TV movie he made called LA Takedown, so it was more like he just wanted another go at the story to make it better. And it worked out. Everyone loves Heat, but hardly anyone remembers LA Takedown. I want to take a look at 2 beloved movies that are remakes, Scarface and A Fistful of Dollars. Let's start with Scarface. You hear that title and you think of Al Pacino snorting coke and introducing all of his buddies to his little friend. The movie is actually a remake of a Howard Hawks film that released in 1932, which was also called Scarface. The 2 films share some thematic similarities about the rise and fall of the titular gangster, the famous line, "The world is yours," and so on. But they're basically 2 very distinct movies. In the 1932 version, Paul Mooney plays as an Italian gangster in early 30s New York. For the 1983 film, its director, Brian De Palma, set it clearly in South Florida in the 1980s. The remake took a look at the 80s drug trade, Cuban immigration, and 1980s life. So what De Palma did was take a 51-year-old film as a baseline, and he entirely reworked it so that it would be modern and culturally relevant. Now, as for Fistful of Dollars, it's a very straight remake of Kurosawa's classic Yojimbo. It's beat for beat almost the exact same film, but Leone brought the story into color and traded samurai aesthetics for cowboy aesthetics. It wasn't a sanctioned remake though, as Toho sued the production for royalties and credits. Kurosawa wrote to Leone saying, "Signor Leone, I have just had the chance to see your film. It is a very fine film, but it is my film. Since Japan is a signatory of the Berne Convention on the International Copyright, you must pay me." Does that make A Fistful of Dollars bad? No, it still rocks. I love both films. They have the same story, same beats, and some of the same jokes, though a few things were changed. But both films have excellent direction, and Toshiro Mifune and Clint Eastwood are both legendary leading men. They can coexist and work as complementary films, and maybe a fun double feature. What I'm getting at is this: remakes can be good, but maybe they're often not. They're good or even great when the people making them love the source material and want to put their own spin on it. Sometimes there are films that have great ideas in them, but were just executed poorly. Those are great films to remake because a good filmmaker can see where the original went wrong and make something great out of it. However, remakes are not good when it's a person or a studio who just wants to make a cheap buck by profiting off of people's nostalgia. If the intention is soulless, then the result is soulless.
When I first saw the CGI version of Peter Cushing's Grand Moff Tarkin show up in Rogue One, the worst of my feelings were that I could tell it was CGI. These days, I fear it was the beginning of something much more insidious. While using old footage and computer manipulation to create scenes using the likeness of a long-dead actor has been tried as far back as 2004, it has become more and more commonplace to simulate the likenesses of long-deceased actors using CGI and AI and puppet them around in movies. Harold Ramis, who played Egon Spangler in the original Ghostbusters, shows up in Ghostbusters Afterlife as a ghost. Christopher Reeve shows up in that awful Flash movie as a horribly uncanny abomination, along with half a dozen or so actors, some dead, some still alive, including George Reeves, who, killed himself. Just recently, Ian Holmes' likeness was used in multiple scenes in Alien Romulus as another android. The director, Fede Alvarez, says he reached out to the widow of Ian Holm and received authorization from the rest of his family. Ian Holmes' widow felt he would have loved it. Besides the fact she could not possibly know that for certain, it kind of doesn't matter to me that Ian Holmes' wife and family approved of it. That's better than them not approving of it, but my stance on this as a moral issue is that we should not be puppeting around the face and voice of a dead person as if they were still alive for our entertainment, especially when it is entirely avoidable. Nothing about the existence of Romulus required Ian Holmes' likeness. The android could have been anyone, just a random actor. Fede Alvarez defends himself, saying it was a genuine attempt to honor him. But there's so much money at stake with these kinds of films, I just don't believe that. The fact that anyone excuses this, and that it's not an instant reason to avoid this film, astonishes me. It's one thing to use tricks of editing or even a CGI model, in the case that an actor dies while making a film to complete their scenes. It's quite another to bring an actor back from the dead when it is entirely avoidable for, let's face it, a cheap thrill of nostalgia. I find it absolutely repulsive. To be clear, it wouldn't matter if these uncanny recreations looked super convincing, and it wouldn't matter if they got permission from everyone in the actors' families for each of these cameos. If they got consent from the living person before they died to do something like this, while that would be better, I would still oppose it artistically. There are more subtle and tasteful ways to honor a dead actor. Literally having them show up as some sort of action figure just speaks to a lack of imagination. Creating projects with the intention of using a long-dead actor is not just tacky, but sociopathic. This isn't simply playing archival footage of an actor. This isn't simply an actor playing another dead actor, who, while is imitating a dead person, can easily be separated from the real person who once existed. This is a trick of digital necromancy, an attempt to bring back the living likeness and aura of a once real person. It's not just a copy, it's a bad copy. It is fundamentally a refusal of death, and a denial of the sacredness of death. In modern cinema, nothing is allowed to die. No franchise can simply end. If it does end, it must go out kicking and screaming. No once living actor can rest if they can be resurrected for profit later down the line. If the film industry can't stop themselves from using AI to resurrect the dead, I guarantee it is salivating at the thought of being able to use AI in every part of filmmaking. They tried to do it with the intro to Secret Invasion. Even with the death of James Earl Jones, I'm certain the only thing on Disney executives' minds is, do we recreate his voice with AI? Because even though Darth Vader's story has been complete for decades, they have to bring him back. He's too popular not to bring back. They have no self-control. They cannot help themselves. Christ, is there going to be a point we don't get any new actors anymore because of AI? The whole system is based on intellectual properties, with a significantly weakened star-based system, which doesn't allow interesting scripts to succeed without being attached to an IP. Are we seriously going to resurrect actors just to play the same stale characters? This is why I call this the worst era in film history. There's been periods of remakes and sequels in movie history, but I have never seen anything like this before. People have to stop paying for these movies if you want things to change. I tend to avoid these movies, because when I hear about them, I consistently hear bad things. And once these movies have been out for a few weeks, no one talks about them. Kung Fu Panda 4 was the 8th highest grossing film in the US this year. When was the last time someone talked about it? Wonka made a ton of money last year. When was the last time you saw someone mention that movie? There was a live-action Avatar remake on Netflix this year. I completely forgot that existed. Do you know that a Pinocchio remake came out? Another Ghostbusters film came out this year. Did you know that? On the other hand, when Dune Part 2 was released, there was a solid month of very popular memes about it. And yes, it is a remake, but of a book series and a film that is famously not considered the most perfect film of the 80s. And it also has the advantage of being good. I believe these films will have no cultural impact. That's the silver lining to all of this. They have no staying power. Disney has a finite amount of good films they can remake in their backlog. And even if they remake every single one of them, they will run out. And when they run out, they will be screwed. We saw them try and make an original project again, and it was terrible. The music in a Disney musical was bad. Can you believe that? They have forgotten how to make good movies. When people say that if you keep complaining about all these movies, all these Star Wars projects, all these sequels and remakes and films based off other properties, maybe you won't get any more, as if the audience was some sort of misbehaving child. They fail to realize, I would rather have no films than an abundance of films that cannibalize our culture. These studio films are products, and over again, we have been sold significantly worse products than what we had before. Yes, I want these films to fail. I want them to fail because they have given me no reason to wish for their success. But if it's the case that these kinds of films continue to be successful, then I see a dark future ahead, where the same handful of franchises are restarted over and over, and billions of dollars are spent not on artists trying to move us into the future, but on trying to resurrect the past. We will not only see the same ideas on the big screen again and again, but also the same faces. Reminder that if family sleuthing interests you, sign up for a 14-day free trial with the link below and enjoy all MyHeritage has to offer. Thanks to MyHeritage for sponsoring this video. Another announcement, Fudo, a tech company who employs some friends I know, is holding a contest for all UI and UX designers. The contest is to create a new cohesive design language for their brand and apps. The grand prize is $5,000 along with a chance at a full-time position. It's only open to US residents over 18. If you're interested in applying, you can learn more at contest.fudo.org. I'm not being paid to say this, it's just a potential job opportunity for any artists and designers in my audience. A special thanks to the Kino Corner for his segment and help with this video. His channel is linked in the description. The names scrolling past are my patrons from Patreon, who help support the channel. Their funds allow me to make videos like this and more. If you want to become a patron, you also get access to behind-the-scenes material, some of my writing, early video announcements, and access to my fan Discord. Just click the link in the description below. Anyway, my name is Solar Sands, and goodbye.
This is a Mormon temple. They can be found across the